she'd never really had much experience with GD.
Mhm.
So her suggestion was maybe that I did birth in the hospital, which I was kind of like, you're probably not my midwife because I want someone to, sort of support me and, like say, well, this is, we can do this or we can do that, or, just sort of come up with other options. So I turned to Home Birth Queensland actually, and I gave them a call and I was like, I just don't know what to do. What do I do?
Mhm.
And I had this other lady whose picture just resonated with me. And every time I saw her, I was like, oh, she just looks like a really nice lady. Anyway, so the lady at Home Birth Queensland said, go with her. She's amazing. She's been doing it for over like 10 years, I think it was. She knows what she's doing. She will look after you. So I gave Sal a call, and pretty much straight away, I was like, she's the one. I don't even have to meet her. She's already the one.
Hey, you're listening to Empowered Births at Home with me, Esmeralda, the home birth doula, as your host. I am a mama of three, fellow home birther, and entrepreneur. I am completely obsessed with birth, more specifically, home birth. And this is a podcast where women share their empowering home birth stories, along with the journey that led them down the path to home birth. Whether you're currently pregnant, planning a home birth with your first or fourth baby, or even just someone who is a complete birth nerd like me, this is the podcast for you. So let's get into this week's empowering home birth story. We are on episode 28 today. We will be chatting with Hannah, who is a mom of three living in Australia, and she had her home birth while being diagnosed with gestational diabetes. So she is going to share with us a lot of tips and advice that she has for anyone who may be going through this situation as well. So let's go ahead and bring Hannah on.
Hello, I am Hannah. I am 31 years old, mum of three. I live in Gympie, Queensland, with my beautiful husband and three kids. And yeah, I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. So, what got you into the home birth world?
So I've always been kind of interested in home birth because going against the norm was always something that I liked to do. However, with my first baby, it was the first baby. I was so clueless. You just kind of listen to the information that you're given by family and friends around you. So in the back of my head, I always had this niggle to have a home birth. I got diagnosed with gestational diabetes with the first, second, and third baby. So, of course, that's absolutely not allowed. You're immediately high risk. So, yeah, I missed out the first two births, but
Okay.
I feel like I grew sort of more stronger and I did more research. And the third one, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to
Mhm.
do it anyway. I'm going to find someone that will support me in doing it because to me, I didn't really understand what risk gestational diabetes gave me while I was birthing.
Yeah.
There's no one could answer my questions. So we moved to a farm and I decided that, yeah, I was going to birth on the land with my family. And yeah, so it was sort of just like a defying moment, but also something that I'd always thought about and wanted to do. So
Yeah.
it was the third baby that sort of gave me the strength and confidence in myself to do that. So yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. How
Mm.
did your first two births go?
So my first birth was induced birth at 40 weeks and 4 days. So I pushed it out to 40 weeks.
Mhm.
Every intervention you could possibly imagine besides having a C-section. So I started off really well. I was in an MGP program, so I did have a midwife, but
Okay.
for some reason they decided to start me off with a different lady. So then my actual midwife could be there for the actual birth.
Okay.
It was just, I look back now and I'm like, that was horrific. Like from getting the cannula in to losing the heartbeat, like just everything really. And then as soon as I got the epidural, they were like, oh, you're centimeters dilated. It's, like it's nearly time to push. And then my midwife decided to rock up and
Um,
like literally probably an hour later, it was time to push. And I had to have an episiotomy because he was stuck. Yeah, so I had a natural birth, which was really beautiful. At that time, I was so proud of myself because like my biggest thing was I didn't really want to have a C-section. I wanted to have a natural birth. Then after sort of calming down and processing the birth, I sort of realized how much did actually go wrong and how traumatic it was in a way. So with my daughter, it was a whole different experience. We still birthed in the hospital. We were with the MGP program, but our midwife started us off in induced labor. So she was also 40 weeks over the 38 weeks that they recommend. And yeah, so my midwife was present. We also had a beautiful, beautiful student midwife. And I was in the shower for pretty much the entire time because they changed the monitoring so you could get them wet.
okay.
So yeah, I birthed in the shower with just gas and my husband. There was probably about 8 different midwives in the room with us.
Oh, wow.
Uh, but at the time, I didn't like, I was just in the zone, so I didn't
Yeah.
really care. Just as long as my student midwife was there, she caught Lenny and passed her through to me. And it was just, yeah, it was just completely different to what Jack's was like. So I feel like each birth I just got stronger and sort of more in tune with my body. But yeah, Lenny's birth I did not find traumatic at all. It was
Okay.
just, yeah, beautiful. Even though it was in hospital, I had the water, and yeah, so as beautiful as a hospital birth could be, that to me was, yeah, really good.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And so, how did you go about the journey of looking for someone who would support you for a home birth?
So we started off originally with a local midwife here in Gympie. We met for coffee, and I was umming and ahhing about doing the GD test because as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I went on a keto diet.
Okay.
So my blood sugar levels were low. I didn't feel like I had it, but I sort of gave in to sort of the darkness in my head, like just paranoia, I guess. Just
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing with GD is people say you're endangering your baby.
Mhm.
So that kind of got in my head a little bit, and I succumbed to the peer pressure and got the test.
Mhm.
I then went back to the doctor and it was zero point 0.1 over.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. So I had it regardless. And the doctor I saw said that she would not support me at all in having a home birth because I had the GD.
Yeah.
She told me that my baby would die.
Oh, no.
I birthed at home and that I was being really irresponsible. So at that point, I called the midwife we had first engaged, and she'd never really had much experience with GD.
Mhm.
So her suggestion was maybe that I did birth in the hospital, which I was kind of like, you're probably not my midwife because I want someone to, sort of support me and, like say, well, this is, we can do this or we can do that, or just sort of come up with other options. So I turned to Home Birth Queensland actually, and I gave them a call and I was like, I just don't know what to do. What do I do?
Mhm.
And I had this other lady whose picture just resonated with me. And every time I saw her, I was like, oh, she just looks like a really nice lady. Anyway, so the lady at Home Birth Queensland said, go with her. She's amazing. She's been doing it for over like 10 years, I think it was. She knows what she's doing. She will look after you. So I gave Sal a call, and pretty much straight away I was like, she's the one. I don't even have to meet her. She's already the one. So she also hadn't had much experience with GD, but she was willing to take it on and sort of learn herself from me in
Yeah.
a way. But she, yeah, was 100% like, yeah, I will support you and help you through this. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. In Queensland, is there any like restrictions that the midwives have with licensed and unlicensed?
They do need to get note, not a note, like a slip signed by a doctor to say that they can support us.
Hmm.
So I went to a completely different doctor and I didn't tell her I was home birthing. I just said I was hiring a private midwife
Yeah.
and she signed the paper straight away. So I think as soon as you mention home birth, they're kind of like, oh, well, I'm not taking responsibility for that. But
Yeah.
that's not what the form is for. The form is to say that they're in, like, I'm not in their care, I'm in the midwife's care.
Uh-huh.
But for some reason, they just think, yeah, that's them taking responsibility for what happens to me in the birth.
Yeah.
So, yeah, unfortunately, without that signed, the insurance, the midwives aren't covered by the insurance. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, because that's where it can get a little bit iffy on finding a midwife is sometimes they just can't do certain clients and take on certain clients because of their license or whatever the rules
Yeah.
are around it. So that's why I was wondering how it is over
Y
there.
yeah, yeah, you definitely need to have that signed or yeah, they're not covered by insurance,
Okay.
unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
And so on the journey with this new midwife that you found who was willing to work with you, were there any things that she kind of suggested or that you guys worked on to help with the gestational diabetes?
Yes, so she was so full of resources, like everything that happened, and I just felt a bit icky about it. She would give me the guidelines, so her guidelines that she has to work with. Then she would also send me information that challenged the guidelines.
Mm.
And then she said to me, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
So it was just like hand holding, like really amazing hand holding for me because sometimes it's hard to find stuff on the internet and
Yeah.
they just want you to do what they want you to do. And she just had so many different articles or even books for me to read. She gave me Lily Nichols' book, which changed my life. Like it changed my life. She, just so many things like books, just yeah. So everything that she found in relation to gestational diabetes, she said to me, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like even just drinking a cup full of chia seeds
Mm.
at night time, it lowers your blood sugar levels the next morning. Like
Yeah.
just little things like that. And she just made it such an easy breezy pregnancy with the gestational diabetes
Yeah.
because it was just such a stress the last two pregnancies and I was testing my sugar all the time. I was eating right and it just wasn't happening. But you know, it's your body at the end of the day that's not producing what it needs to. It's not your fault as well. So
Mhm.
I think that's another big thing she helped me with is just not feeling so bad because I was trying so hard, but my body was like, nope, not happening. So yeah, she provided so many things that helped.
Mhm. Is there one thing that you would tell someone who does have gestational diabetes that was the biggest thing that helped you through pregnancy?
Yeah, I would say get the book. Get Lily Nichols' book, Real Food for Pregnancy. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
it's called.
Mhm.
And yeah, just the thing also is there's a lot of stuff on the internet about the keto diet
Mm.
being bad for you when you're pregnant. And I'm not saying do it, but I'm saying, you know, everything that they tell you to eat with gestational diabetes is full of carbs. So my
Mhm.
biggest thing was carbs turn into sugars. So like they eat potatoes and pumpkin and you know starchy vegetables when really that's probably not the best for you. So I think going back to basics and just sort of researching diet as well
Mhm.
and foods and what foods create certain reactions from your body.
Yeah.
It's just so basic, but because they tell you to do one thing, everyone does it. So
Mhm.
like I didn't eat bread, I didn't eat potato, I didn't eat, you know, all these things, just like lots of like fats and protein.
Yeah.
So and definitely get the book. The book is like life-changing. Gives you all the little hacks and yeah, it's so good.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. And so if you want to go ahead and start going into your home birth story, wherever you want to start from, you can start there.
Okay, awesome. All right. So I think my biggest thing getting closer to my due date was that I was worried because I'd never gone into natural birth, like natural labor before. And I think that was my biggest fear, was not trusting in my body to like know what to do, I guess, in a way, because I was all like I was induced with the first two births. So I think that sort of drove me a little bit crazy because I was like, is my water going to break? Am I just going to start having contractions? Like, how's this going to happen? And then I just sort of set myself in a mad panic. So I ended up getting to 41 and 4. And I was like, come on, like, every day is such an uphill battle because you're like, is today the day?
Mhm.
And then nothing happens. And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the day before I went into labor, a couple of days before that, I lost lots of mucus plug. So, and it was very red, which I'd never had before. So that
Okay.
I called it my midwife straight away and I was like, is this normal? She's like, totally normal. It's just a bloody show. Like,
Mhm.
it just means you're getting close. I'm like, okay, cool. So the day before I was having contractions, they weren't too painful. Like they were just pretty average, but they were consistent.
Mhm.
So I was like, oh, I think this is it. I think this is happening. So I said to my husband, I think maybe you should stay home from work today, just in case. And he was happy to do that. So we didn't have the kids that day because my parents were looking after them. And so we went and got lunch. And I remember getting a contraction in the car and holding on to the door, being like, whoa, that was huge. And I was like, maybe it is actually going to happen today. Like I was getting really excited. So my sister had planned to come to have the kids so I could have them at the birth. And I called her and I was like, yeah, I think maybe you should start making your way here because she was a couple of hours away. So she came. By the time she got to our house, everything had just stopped. So the contractions went, everything, yeah, it just stopped. So I was like, okay, well, anyway, it is what it is. I'm still probably closer than I was yesterday. So all good. That night I got not food poisoning, gastro. So I was up all night vomiting, got hardly any sleep. And by the morning I was just exhausted, couldn't eat, couldn't drink. It was just, yeah, I was dead. Then the contractions started at about 7 o'clock
Mm.
and they were super consistent. My sister was doing the timing, so I didn't really have to worry about it. And I was just laying in bed, and I can't remember what time it got to, but my midwife called me and she's like, how about I just come? I'll set up my stuff. We'll just, like play by ear. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I can just go home. Like it's fine. So I was like, okay, cool. And they were like contractions kept consistency as well. And I was like, okay, I think this is actually going to happen today. So I
Yeah.
started to get really excited and in the zone. And we had the music playing. The kids went to my mum's. And I guess I was just trying to rest as much as I could because I had nothing in my tummy, had no water, nothing. So by the time the second midwife got there, I was like, oh my God, this is it. It's happening. And I had a big emotional release and just started crying. And then my midwife got there, and as soon as she touched me, I just lost it.
Mm.
I was bawling my eyes out. She's like, this is great. This is really good. Like, just let it all out. Get it, all out of your system. She's like, you're about to have a baby. And I'm like, oh my God, wow, I can do it. But so I started in the bed. We had a mattress on the floor, the pool. We had a birthing pool in the middle of the lounge room. And then I decided to go to the shower because I think that's just where I was with Lenny. So I just went and was in that space. Then it got a little bit too intense for the shower. So the pool was ready by then. So I jumped in the pool. It My contractions never stopped when I got in the pool, which I was pretty excited about because I've heard heaps of stories of ladies getting in the pool and then it just stopping.
Yeah.
So they were really consistent still, really strong, getting stronger. My husband got in the pool and then it just got a bit too hot. So sort of all the steam was a bit much for me and I started to panic a little bit. So I said, I can't breathe. I got to get out because it was just too hot. So I got out, went back to the shower and I just felt a drop. And I was like, oh, he's like, he just dropped. And they were all running around grabbing towels, like ready to go. And I'm like, I don't think we're there yet, but just in case. So I was holding onto the top of the shower, just hanging for the contractions because they were just so intense. And then I said, I need to lay down. I just need to lay down. So my kids were back at that point. So they were following us around with the torches and just playing and relaxing and whatever else they were doing. And I got back to the bed and the contractions were really, really intense by that stage. And I was hurting really bad in my hips. So I had my husband sort of pinned up against the wall whilst I was contracting. And I just said, I think he's stuck, like it's really hurting in my hips. So my second midwife, Tamron, just grabbed my hips and just did a hip squeeze. And then the next contraction, my water broke.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was like, oh my God, like, oh. And just the smell. You always remember the smell of your waters breaking. And I was like, oh my God. Like my midwife, Sal, said, next push, it could be a baby. Like it could be happening. And I'm like, oh my God. So the next contraction came pretty fast and his head was coming.
Mm.
And I'd never felt the ring of fire in my life. And it is called the ring of fire for a reason because it was a ring of fire.
Yeah.
And I just remember standing up being like, help, because I thought I was just being ripped it up. Anyway, so the next contraction came and another hip squeeze and they were saying, he's coming, he's coming. And I'm like to Marcus, get him, catch him, catch him. But I had his arms up against the wall, so he couldn't really catch him because I was restraining him. Yes, I'll just put him down on the bed and then I just picked him straight up and put him straight on my chest and yeah, just cried, I guess. And yeah, it was beautiful. And then everyone was like, sit down, like it's okay. And yeah, it was amazing. Like I was just on cloud nine, just couldn't believe that. Just the release as well. Like once they were out, it's just like this angelic feeling, I guess, in a way, that
Yeah.
you just did this all by yourself. Bam. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Amazing. Were the two older siblings there when baby was born?
Yes, one
Yeah.
of them was watching. So Jack was quite intrigued. Lenny was not as intrigued, but Jack was right up in there and sort of like, what's happening?
What were their ages at the time?
So Jack was 3. No, yeah, Jack was 3 and Lenny was 4. No, 2, sorry. Other way
Okay.
around. Yeah. So they were still quite young, but
Yeah,
very, very interested.
that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was there anything that you noticed during the birth that kind of had to be done because of your gestational diabetes, or was it just like a normal, perfect home birth?
Nothing, nothing at all. I didn't even test my sugars
Very
because I
good.
had no food in my system. I'm like, what are we, like, what's the point of testing? And
Mhm.
it's just another interruption as well. I agreed to have the fetal monitoring whenever she could, and I can't even remember her doing it that often. But yeah, absolutely nothing at
Yeah.
all. Yeah.
And that's the reason why I asked, because I figured as much. And I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of prove a point to anyone who might be listening and thinking, I can't have a home birth because I'm diagnosed with gestational diabetes. And it's exactly like what you said. There's no difference during the labor. And it's just like if you are eating, yeah, check your sugars and like keep monitoring that and everything. But it's not like it's some big emergency where you have
No.
to be at the hospital during it. You can
Yeah.
labor at home and you can have your baby at home with gestational diabetes.
Exactly. And asking the obstetricians that question as well, like why am I at risk whilst I'm laboring? just because I have gestational diabetes. Like, what can go wrong because my gestational diabetes? Like, is my baby going to die? Or, like, it, like, the only thing she could say was that the cord could get wrapped around its neck. And I was like, that can happen in any birth.
Yeah.
So that doesn't happen just because you have GD.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's exactly right. Like, you can do it,
Yeah.
and it is possible, if it's managed. And yeah, it's not a risk at all, really, if you're managing it and you're okay and you're happy with your body and everything that's happening. So yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. And how did the postpartum go? Like immediately right after the placenta and all of that?
So I did the 3 golden hours. So the Thompson method with the 3 golden hours of feeding. He fed for 2.5 hours after birth.
Yeah.
So we didn't check his sugar levels. We didn't do any of that because he wasn't showing any signs to be worried about. So he fed for 2.5 hours. Then I got up and we weighed him and I birthed the placenta. I then had some food. Had some pizza, which is my favorite. And yeah, I got my placenta encapsulated. So the lady came and picked that up that night and I had it the next day. Postpartum, the first day was really hard on us because I didn't really have any I had family, but I didn't have any friends support. I didn't get a doula. I didn't get any of that. I didn't prep any meals. I was really just laid back because I already had 2 kids. I was like, what's one more, But that's something I really did regret because the first day was so hard. My husband got the gastro that I had. So he was out of action. He was vomiting all day. We had the 2 kids. I just had the baby and we had no support at all. My sister had to go back to work. So it was struggle street that first day. It was really, really hard. I was, I could get up and make myself something to eat, but I just had a baby as well. So I also wanted to rest. So it was kind of that internal struggle of I should be doing this, but I actually really need to do this. And I think if I knew what I know now about postpartum and how beautiful and amazing it can be by being held by so many women that know what you're going through, I would have definitely prepared. Like I definitely would have done meals. I definitely would have accepted meals as well. Like I'm very like, no, I can do it. It's fine. But I would have been like, yes, please, that would be fantastic because you put pressure on your husband as well because he's like, no, don't worry, I'll cook all the meals. Like it'll be fine. But then if he's knocked out with the gastro, like there's no one there. So I think that's definitely something I would have invested in. My body recovered probably, I'd say, in about 3 days, just because it's like running a marathon when you have a baby. Every muscle in your body hurts. But I think also another thing I did struggle with was my middle child cried for like 4 days after Tommy was born. So that was very hard on us because we were trying to get her adjusted to having him there, but she's also used to being the baby. So that was really hard dealing with that, plus having a newborn as well that needs you and wants to be on you and feeding and all that kind of stuff. So that was definitely a challenge as well. As much as we thought we were prepared for that, we weren't. So yeah, overall the postpartum, I think if I were to have another baby, I would definitely prep a bit more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. That is something that I love to focus on because I do feel like it's kind of an oversight when you're pregnant and planning for all these other things for like the baby mostly for when they're here, but you're
Yeah.
not really preparing yourself for afterwards. And
Yeah,
that's really big. Like those freezer meals really come in handy.
they do.
Even
Yeah.
if you do have a partner who gets like paternity leave and gets to stay home, it
Yeah.
still just makes it so much easier because then they're able to just not even think about like what they're making and they just pop it in the oven. And
Yeah.
makes it just so much easier for everybody who's home. And then they can focus more of their attention on like caring for you, caring for other
Yeah.
children, caring for the
Yeah.
baby. and not focusing on taking an hour or two to cook meals. And
Yeah.
yeah, it just helps a lot. Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I totally, totally agree.
Is there anything else that you can think of that you kind of wanted to touch on in our episode or anything like that?
I think just with the gestational diabetes and for girls that, or not girls, women that are worried about it, I think just really listening to what your body is telling you and don't be hard on yourself because it is what nature and Mother Earth has given you. That's just what you're going to deal with. But I think research everything. Research everything is definitely something that I've learned this pregnancy. And I wish I'd done the previous two because I just ignored that inner voice that was sort of telling me things that I should have been listening to. So yeah, I think also being labeled as high risk as soon as you have GD as well is a bit scary. But if you're provided with the right information, it's not at all scary. It's
Yeah.
like a little tiny little thing in your pregnancy that you don't really need to be worried about if it's well managed. Mm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of the advice that you gave today. It can be very helpful to anyone who is in that situation while listening to this episode. So I thank you so much for that. And your story was amazing.
Thank you.
And then you did mention that you are a doula. So if anyone wants to kind of find you and connect with you, where can they do that?
So my Instagram is You Are My Sunshine Doula. So the name sort of is just like You Are My Sunshine. It was always my thing with my mum as a child. Instead of saying love you, it was like You Are My Sunshine, my only sunshine. So I just want to spread that sunshine with women, mostly in postpartum, struggling with postpartum at the moment. So yeah, You Are My Sunshine Doula. And I'm also on Facebook as well. All my information is on there.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go ahead and leave those links down below so anyone who wants to reach out to you can find you really easy.
Cool. Thank you.
Wow, what a great story Hannah told us, and how amazing the advice that she gave to all of us here to just learn from her experience and be able to know that you can have a home birth with gestational diabetes. Being labeled as high risk does not always mean you are high risk, and it does not always mean that you cannot have a home birth either. So, no matter what label you are given in the medical system, does not mean that you cannot have a home birth. If you are managing everything well, you are maintaining everything, there is no reason why you cannot have a home birth. So make sure that you're not just following what a OB is telling you, because obviously an OB is not going to have a home birth as their first option. And that is why they are going to tell you that you cannot have a home birth. So just be sure that you are reaching out to midwives in your area and seeing if they would accept you on as a client, even with a diagnosis such as gestational diabetes or anything else that may make you high risk. Because, like I said, sometimes that is not the case, and you can have a home birth even with those labels. Midwives know how to control things like gestational diabetes, and they are really great at preventative care as well. So definitely just make sure you're looking at all of your options before just following what one doctor may tell you and them making you think that you cannot have a home birth because of that label. Just as a reminder, everything said on this podcast is not to be taken as medical advice. Always reach out to a medical provider such as an OB or a midwife. Hopefully, you're doing both. And just make sure that you don't take any of this for fact or medical advice. Like I said, always do your due diligence and do your own research as well, with this as kind of your first base and just one simple tool out of so many other tools that you can get from different resources and care providers as well. This is not something to be following blindly on. So definitely just make sure you are completely informing yourself in all aspects. If you are currently planning and preparing for a home birth, then I'd love to share with you more information about the Empowered Home Birth course. This is a home birth based birth course, and inside this 8-week program, you will receive educational videos and weekly emails filled with additional resources for you to prepare for your empowering home birth. Once you purchase the course, you also get perks such as access to my entire resource library and private community chats. To enroll, click the link in the show notes and get started on the journey to your empowered home birth. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share with any family or friends who may benefit from these empowering stories. Also, don't forget to leave a 5-star rating and review to help others who are searching for this information find this podcast. I'll see you next week for another empowering home birth story.